As a sales professional that is new to ITAD, IT Asset Disposition in data centers, ITAD and data centers, I find that many of my peers have been in the industry for over 10 years. What's the best way to start prospecting and building connections with decision makers having no experience to speak of? That is a fantastic question. What do you do if you're brand new to sales and IT asset disposition? And competing against account executives and sales professionals, business development reps that have been in this industry for 10 years. How do you prospect and build connections with decision makers having no experience to speak of? This is a great question, a great scenario that anyone should be able to dive into. The first thing is think of yourself more as a tour guide or a hotel concierge rather than the be-all end-all expert on ITAD. But what I'd encourage you to do, and I don't know whether your employer required this before you joined on or not, is to literally go to a search, whether you're doing this on Copilot or Google or Perplexity, it doesn't matter, but go and invest a couple of hours and literally read every article, watch every video, attend every on-demand podcast that you can, spending a couple of hours on what is IT asset and disposition and how is IT asset and disposition utilized in the data center industry. We actually even have some content on that on DCSMI on the 22 data center technologies that go-to-market professionals need to know about in the space, because that's the beginning of starting to build up some expertise. The next thing I would look to do is I would go to your marketing leader or sales leader and says, where are the buyer personas? Where's the customer insight research? Where are the most recent surveys? Where are the case studies? Where are the testimonials? Where are the reviews? And spend an hour or two reading through those as well to understand in your best client's own words, what are their biggest goals? What are their biggest challenges? What are their biggest frustrations? What causes them to want to go look for something that leads to a IT asset disposition sales opportunity? In their own words is the most important part. In addition to that, you can look at reviews and case studies for other companies that also provide ITAD. Go to their website, read their case studies page, read their reviews. Go to the YouTube channel and see if there's any interviews or podcasts with their customers. So you start to ingest this and you start to understand what is the conversation that's going on in someone's head, whether it's a CTO, whether it's a help desk person, whether it's a CFO, whether it's a facilities person. Again, this is going to vary depending on the size of data centers that you're selling to. Generally, the smaller the data center operator, the more likely it is that you'll find someone who does 10 different jobs. The larger the data center, you're going to find much more specialization across a lot of different teams. But you'll start to get a sense for their own words on what caused them to prioritize these kinds of initiatives. That's part of your onboarding and your education. A half a day to a day, you can knock it out of the park. The next thing I would strongly consider doing is, as you start coming across this great content, start sharing some of the best resources that you find on LinkedIn, adding a little bit of your own commentary. And obviously, before you do that, make sure your LinkedIn profile is in good shape on all the best practices that people have been optimizing around for at least 10 years. A professional headshot, a value-focused headline, a value-focused summary. Certainly, you want to make sure that you hit the credibility milestone of 500 plus connections. If you have recommendations from past coworkers, past clients, that's even more impactful. If you can pin content up at the top that's of you either guest blogging or appearing on podcasts or at conferences, photos, what have you, that help to show some social proof of something that's tangentially related to what you do. The whole purpose with all of this, though, is to be seen more as a consultant on IT asset disposition and less as a salesperson. So you want to be seen as a resource person, even if initially you're just sharing other people's resources, which ideally are your own company's resources, or at least vendor neutral kind of resources that aren't from a competitor or direct competitor. So those are the kinds of things that I would do on a more intermediate term basis, on things that will take a couple of months to stand up and to start to see, or at least a couple of weeks to stand up to start to see results from. as I would talk to your internal marketing person or your boss, depending on who it is, and say, I have this weird idea that I could position our company and position myself as someone that shares really helpful advice for our most important persona, which may be like a CTO, um, talking about things that are directly related to asset disposition and the kind of struggles that people go through when they're trying to figure out what to do with massive amounts of high value hardware, server, networking, telecommunication equipment that's being decommissioned. And maybe you bring on decommissioning experts as well, if that's not something that your company is actively involved in. But you build this interview-based podcast. You can see a great example of how DCSMI, how I'm actually doing this with the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. And you start with your warmest relationships. Interview your internal subject matter experts, interview your favorite clients, interview your favorite channel partners, your favorite MSPs that you work with, whoever it is. And then gradually, as you build up your first 10 or 20 interviews, it becomes easier to go to other people for these kinds of interviews. But that alone will make an enormous difference of boosting your reputation in the space.